A 2-meter giant who forced open Russia's doors to Europe. He enforced European dress codes, built a city on swamps, and reshaped a nation. Who was this man? He is the one who dragged Russia out of the Middle Ages and turned it into an empire. He is Peter the First, Peter the Great. Fact 1. A child born in chaos. The man who would change the fate of Russia was born in June 1672 in Moscow. His name was Peter, but at the time, no one could have guessed that this child would one day rebuild an entire empire. Russia was in deep turmoil, a chaotic struggle for the throne, power battles, and the heavy grip of religion had frozen the country in the past. Peter, the son of Tsar Alexei's second wife, grew up amidst tense family politics. When he officially ascended to the throne, he was only 10 years old, but the real power was not in his hands. His older half-brother Ivan the was declared co-Tsar, but Ivan was sick and weak. The actual power belonged to their sister Sophia. Sophia was intelligent and politically shrewd. For Peter, this was a period of growing in the shadows, but Peter wasn't afraid of challenges. He grew up far from the court, in a freer environment. The village of Preobrazhenskoye. There he didn't play aristocratic games. He touched real life. Wood, nails, soil, and water. He created a toy army. But this was no ordinary child's game. He structured it like a real military force, with ranks, drills, and weapons. This toy army would later become the Preobrazhensky and Semyonovsky regiments, the backbone of the future Russian Imperial Army. Even as a child, Peter was observing how the state functioned, witnessing the dark politics of the court, while also shaping himself as a warrior, a sailor, and a builder. Fact 2. The Tsar who became a secret agent in Europe. Imagine a Tsar not sitting on a throne, but holding a hammer, wearing wooden clogs, and working like a carpenter. He was a ruler who hid his name, identity, even his pride, all to change the future of his people. This kind of ruler is rare in history, but Peter the Great was exactly that. In 1697, Peter decided that Russia could no longer continue with its outdated ways. The West, Europe, was decades, maybe centuries ahead of Russia in industry, science, technology, and military affairs. Peter wanted to change that, but he didn't sit in a palace writing decrees. Instead, he set off on a diplomatic mission known as the Grand Embassy. Officially, he was there to accompany his ambassadors, but in truth, he was traveling in disguise. He introduced himself as Pyotr Mikhailov. No one knew he was the Tsar of Russia. He traveled across England, Holland, and Prussia. He worked as a common laborer in shipyards, hammering nails, carving wood, and learning to steer ships. He studied everything, from submarine technology and artillery to public health systems and even dental procedures. This journey wasn't just about gaining knowledge. It laid the foundation for the massive reforms he would implement in Russia. When he returned, he was no longer just a Tsar. He was a builder, a soldier, a sailor, a teacher, and a revolutionary. And he had a plan to drag Russia into Europe, even if it had to be by force. Fact 3. He built Russia's navy with his own hands. Imagine a vast country, full of land, with a powerful army, but without a true navy or access to the seas. Now imagine a Tsar who personally sets out to fix that, not by delegation, but by action. He builds an empire, not on sand, but on water. Peter the Great had been fascinated with the sea since childhood. Over time, that fascination grew into an obsession to build a powerful navy for the Russian Empire. At the time, Russia was weak in both the Baltic and Black Seas. These waters were dominated by the mighty Ottoman and Swedish empires, but Peter wanted to change that, not just with weapons, but with knowledge. He studied, observed, and when the time came, he fought. After returning from Europe, he began sketching ship designs himself. He created blueprints, established naval plans, and laid the very foundation of the Russian Navy with his own hands. He wasn't born a sailor. He became Russia's first admiral. From the anchor to the rudder, he was involved in every detail. He ordered shipyards built on the Volga River, the Sea of Azov, and later the Baltic coast. In 1696, after the successful Azov campaign, He captured the Azov fortress from the Ottomans, giving Russia its first window to the sea, and then he declared something historic. A navy is necessary. A ruler without a navy is no ruler at all. That year marked the birth of the Russian Navy. For Peter, shipbuilding wasn't just a technical process. It was a symbol of power, independence, and progress. He didn't just want to protect Russia. He wanted to launch it onto the world stage. And he did. Years later, he crushed the Swedish Navy in the Baltic. That victory was more than just military. It marked Russia's rise as a maritime empire. Fact 4. He was a giant. Literally, he didn't just expand Russia, he towered over it. Peter the Great was physically enormous, not just in influence but in size. Standing at nearly 2 meters, about 6 feet 7 inches, he was a giant by the standards of his time. In court and among the people, he looked like a living legend. But it wasn't just his height, he was incredibly strong. Stories tell of Peter splitting logs with one hand, crafting iron tools himself, stitching his own boots, and working alongside laborers during ship construction. Once, during a royal banquet, Peter reportedly lifted a giant wine barrel by himself and set it down in the middle of the room, just to amuse the guests. The room fell silent in awe. He was no ordinary monarch. He was a working force, a muscular symbol of determination. Not a distant ruler, but a man who lived, worked, and fought beside his people. Fact 5. He built a capital on a swamp, St. Petersburg. Imagine a czar who, instead of choosing a beautiful, comfortable place for a capital, deliberately picks the worst location possible, a cold, muddy swamp with no buildings, no roads, no solid foundation, just water, wind, and endless struggle. That was Peter. The swampy land on the Baltic Sea had just been seized from Sweden, but to Peter, it already had a name: St. Petersburg, the city of St. Peter. He turned away from Moscow, the old spiritual capital, and envisioned a new face for Russia, modern, European, and powerful. St. Petersburg would be Russia's window to the West, but building it was brutal. Thousands of peasants, soldiers, and workers labored in freezing mud, starving, sick, and often dying. So many perished that the city was later called the city built on blood. And yet, Peter was there, not in a palace but on site, walking through the mud, sleeves rolled up, working side by side with his builders. He wasn't just a ruler giving orders. He was a builder himself. Construction began in 1703. Soon came the fortress, canals, bridges, European-style streets and palaces. Peter personally drafted the city's layout. He dreamed of a Russian Venice, with the beauty of Paris and the order of Amsterdam. Finally, in 1712, St. Petersburg officially became the capital of the Russian Empire. The court moved, the government moved, the soul of the empire moved. St. Petersburg wasn't just a city, it was Peter's soul carved into stone, a dream born in the mud, now standing tall on the edge of Europe. Fact 6. He gave freedom to women in 17th century Russia. A woman's world ended at the walls of her home. She couldn't read, couldn't walk freely in public. Her face was covered, her voice silenced. But Peter the Great saw something different, a future where women played a role. He realized that Russia couldn't progress with only half its population. Women had to be part of that future. So he made a radical decision for his time. He allowed women to appear in public gatherings and royal courts with uncovered faces. For the first time in Russian history, women could be seen, heard, and included in society. He encouraged noble women to read, to get educated, and yes, even to dance. European-style balls were held at court, and women were invited to attend. Men and women danced together, talked, exchanged ideas. Something unthinkable before. Even more revolutionary, Peter said women should be valued not for their looks, but their intelligence. He gave them more freedom in marriage and social life. Soon, some women began engaging in business, art, and even science. The perfect example? His wife, Catherine I, a woman of humble origins, whom he loved and trusted so much that he made her empress. After Peter's death, she ruled Russia. If women have a visible, powerful role in Russian society today, It's partly because Peter broke the chains first. Fact 7. He executed his own son. Imagine being a ruler who dreams of transforming a nation, and one day you find your own son standing against everything you've built. Peter the Great faced that nightmare. His son, Alexei, rejected Peter's westernization. He clung to the old Russia, Orthodox faith, noble dominance, traditional values. Father and son became bitter enemies. Alexei didn't just disagree with Peter, he became a threat. Peter discovered that Alexei had secretly met with conspirators who opposed the reforms. Some even spoke of rebellion. The Tsar was furious, but not just as a father. As a ruler, he saw a traitor. Alexei was imprisoned, tortured, and in 1718, he was sentenced to death. Some sources say he died from torture, others that he was executed on Peter's direct orders. It was the darkest decision Peter ever made. He crushed his own fatherly instincts in favor of the state. Peter sent a message to the world. Russia comes first, even before my own blood. It's one of the most tragic father-son stories in history, and a chilling example of how far Peter would go for his vision. Fact 8. He modernized the army in European style at the end of the 17th century. The Russian army was stuck in the past. Soldiers lacked discipline, wore mismatched gear, and followed outdated tactics. Going to war with such an army against modern European powers was like fighting fire with a bucket of sand. Peter changed everything. During his travels in Europe, he studied the armies of Prussia, Holland, and England. He was impressed by their order, their training, their technology. Upon returning, he launched a massive military reform. He created a professional standing army, not random fighters, but trained, full-time soldiers. Uniforms were standardized, ranks were introduced, discipline was enforced. Russian troops began to resemble their Western counterparts. He brought in modern weapons and artillery, building factories to produce them at home. No more bows and old muskets. Russian soldiers were now equipped with powerful new firearms. Even more revolutionary, Peter founded military academies, where officers were taught not just war tactics, but also engineering, cartography, and navigation. He knew that brains win wars as much as brawn, and he proved it in 1709, when this new army defeated the invincible Swedish king Charles XII at the Battle of Poltava. It was a turning point. The world took notice. Russia was now a military power. Peter taught his country a vital lesson. You can't conquer a new world with old weapons. Fact 9. A great victory over Sweden. The Battle of Poltava. Imagine standing face to face with the most powerful and undefeated king in Europe. His army moves like lightning, conquering everything in its path. No one can stop him, but Peter the Great did, and he won. In the early 1700s, Swedish King Charles XII was considered a military genius across Europe. His army was disciplined, fast, and ruthless. Russia, on the other hand, was still transforming. New weapons, a new army, new strategies. At first, Peter lost. At the Battle of Narva, the Swedish army crushed the Russians. That defeat pushed Peter to retreat and prepare more seriously. For 9 years, Peter stayed silent, building, planning, strengthening his forces. He built a military industry, sent officers to study in Europe, and grew his army through relentless training. Finally, in 1709, the big day arrived. The Battle of Poltava, fought on the territory of modern-day Ukraine, Peter's army destroyed the Swedish forces. King Charles XII barely escaped and fled to the Ottoman Empire. This battle shattered Europe's pride and marked the beginning of a new era for Russia. Poltava wasn't just a military win. It was the triumph of Peter's years of reforms. It proved that Russia was no longer a backward feudal state, but a rising power on the European stage. After this victory, Peter gained international recognition, and Russia became a major player in European politics. Fact 10. He was feared even after death. Imagine a man who builds a vast empire, passes harsh laws, and reshapes an entire country. And even after his death, people still hesitate to speak his name. Peter the Great died in 1725, leaving behind the legacy of a titan. But his death did not silence the fear and awe he inspired. In the palace, the army, and among the people, a strange quietness fell. It was as if his giant footsteps still echoed in every hall. Even his closest advisors were often too afraid to undo his reforms. They feared that somehow this titan might rise again in thunder. "What are you doing to my legacy?" Some whispered, "Peter is only dead in body. His spirit still watches over Russia. The system he created, the capital he built, St. Petersburg, his navy, his army. These were all the living parts of his undying vision." Even those who stood before his tomb would say, "He looks like he's just asleep, or is he still watching us?" This was not the end of an ordinary ruler. It was the end of an era and the beginning of a legend. Peter the Great did not die. He became history itself. If you like this video, act like an emperor. Hit that like button, subscribe, and comment. Which fact impressed you the most? If you're ready to explore more of this world, we're with you. See you in the next video.